Alright guys, today I'm going to give you a bit of a lesson on large language models and prompt engineering and go through just how to think about setting up your problem and the capabilities you actually have. So all a large language model is really a mathematical model, a mathematical approximation of text. So what they've done is they've created these big data centers that have gone and they've looked at all of the content on the internet and probably a whole bunch of other sources, and they fed them into these mathematical models basically to create a set of weightings that allows the model to approximate what the next line of text is. So if you said hello in a programming context, in a programming textbook, you're probably going to come up with hello world as the example. And so now far more sophisticated than this is they can essentially write whole essays based on content. And applied to these models, they've also put these kind of masking prompts that remove dangerous information, etc., or untoward content. And all that goes into these things called model weights that basically make the model function. That's just text. There is another world around imagery and image interpretation, but if we're talking about imagery, that is a different technology. They're feeding hundreds of images in, and then they are classifying those images, often manually over time, and then they're then feeding the text that's coming out from those classifications into large language models and linking these two worlds together. Okay, now if we talk about the architecture of large language models, so at the moment the context window for a large language model is around 1 million tokens. So I believe that's 1 million, I think it's characters. 1 million characters. It might be words, but I think it's characters. But essentially what we're talking about here is we have some input text. Now the input text is counted in the tokens. Then we've got the complexity of the prompt itself. That has tokens. And then we have the text that comes out at the other end. So this is sort of the output text, is the output. Now the other thing we need to understand is, because this is generative technology, if we had exactly the same text with exactly the same prompt, we are not guaranteed the same output every time. So there is very little consistency in the way these models work, which can be a problem. Now, most people, when they think of ChatGPT, they get the prompt bit. You know, it might be write me a poem. But all they are using when they're writing that poem is the content from the weights. So they go to that weight model, write me a poem, and then it's actually writing you the poem as the output. I think this methodology is, while it's useful, it's very imprecise in what you're trying to do, and you are going to maximize your chances of hallucination. Because if you don't write this prompt really specifically, and you're trying to prompt all text on the internet, the probability that you are going to match these up and get the right output is actually quite low. And I think this is where a lot of people fail with generative AI, is they will look at this, they will look at the errors on the output and then say it's no good, or it's not detailed enough, or it said something wrong. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to, let me just, so we're going to look at the ways that we can get text to input here. So the first thing to say about the inputs is you can upload a picture. So a picture can be read. So if you take a photograph of your phone bill in a relatively high resolution, ChatGPT will transcribe that content and enable you to prompt that content. So that is a hugely valuable capability that should not be underestimated. The second thing is you can upload your own documents. Now, typically, the document limit in ChatGPT, and I think Google Gemini as well, is 5 megabytes. But that's for a single file, and they do allow you to upload multiple files. Okay, now if you were to get, say, a PDF document that had a lot of drawings in it, what you can actually do is you should cut and paste that document into a text file. And if you're in text, 5 megabytes is, quite a significant amount of material that can be uploaded. The other thing to do here is to give these files specific names that you can reference, because what you want to be able to do in your prompt is you want to be able to say, look at this particular document in context of another document. You can actually do that, not a problem. Now, these file types, it'll upload Word documents, PDFs, text files. There's probably a whole list of file formats, but just remember you can upload your own documents here. Then we have our prompts. Okay, now the trick to a prompt, and what we've also got to understand is the prompt actually takes tokens as well. Okay, so the more complicated the logic is here in the prompts, we are going to take some off our total. So if our total was 1 million token limit, we've got obviously the limit of the files that we're uploading here, but then we've got to add in the tokens for the prompt itself and the complexity of that. So that's sort of our model piece. But then also, depending on what we're asking it to output some text over here. Okay, now I think it was Eric Schmidt said that at the moment we're at 1 million, but next year we might be at 10 million. So the limitations I'm saying today, I don't think will be around for a long time. But this output text, now the thing to worry about here is if you want to write, a massive strategy document here, a massive document, you're probably unlikely to, in one prompt, be able to produce that, because you've got your input text, you've got your prompt, and you've got your output. So one thing to think about is you may want to write your prompt here to give you a structure in the first instance, and that structure will create your document. And then what you can do is you can subprompt that over and over again. So if you had 1 million token, but you did 10 prompts here, you're going to get more. So you need to iterate the sections to what you want. And you may even write different prompts for each one of these sections, depending on what you want to do. Now, in terms of prompt engineering itself, let me go here. So in terms of prompt engineering, on Ask Beeves, askbeeves.com, there is a thing called prompt domination, and that has a whole catalog of world-leading prompts. I actually personally think the way you need to think about this is, the first thing is, you can prompt in plain English, okay? So don't be scared of the prompt. In fact, experiment. So if you just want to experiment, and it will listen to what you're saying, you can ask these prompts anything in English, and it's very unlikely not to do something for you. Doesn't mean you're going to get a great result, but it's always going to do something for you. So the first thing to do is have a go. Right? The second thing is, what I would do is I would go to this website, I would look at these prompt dominations, and I would actually read them. Right? So I'd look at the title, I'd look at what it's trying to do. From the description, because it's all in English, you will very clearly understand what it's trying to do. And so what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to run some of these prompts, see the results, and get the power. Now, if you were to read all of these prompts, you are going to pick up on a whole bunch of techniques of how to do this stuff. So that's a really good starting place. I wouldn't go and do courses first. I would just have a go, start looking at prompts, and then continue on and have more go over here. But then what you need to start to do is you start to need to be able to write your own prompts. And the way I like to think about it is, what you're trying to do is, if a universe of text in an LLM is this large, you're probably only going to need certain little bits of it, and you are going to need to use those bits to apply to the content that you give it, and you want to limit the output to the structure you want to create. Now, to be able to hone in on these pieces, there's a few good techniques. One is to give the bot a persona. Right? So if you tell the bot you are a world-famous biologist, what it is going to do is it is going to limit the text that it's looking at, probably to biology and related disciplines. So that is instantly going to cut you down. The second thing is, you need to be really specific about the problem you're trying to solve. Right? So you need to explain to them the situation, the data you have, the desired outcome, right, and how to go about it. Okay? If you give the prompt that kind of information, then it's going to know, okay, I'm looking at the text file you've uploaded. And what you do is you describe that. So you say, I'm trying to solve a specific problem. I've given you this data. I'm looking for a desired outcome, and I would like you to do it X way. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is, once you've given it the instructions, you then want to tell it what the output looks like. So in some instances, you can actually upload a document that has the output structure in it, and you can tell the bot, I want you to look at this problem, I want you to run through this analysis, but then I want you to output it in this particular format. Okay, and you can refer to that. And so if you think about it, you can actually have multiple documents. So you could have, X strategy, and then you could have a particular event, and then you want to write a report in an email. Okay? And so what you do is you say, I want you to look into X situation in the context of an event, and then I want you to write an email. And so before you prompt this, you don't just want to like randomly do it. You actually want to sit down, think about what you're trying to do, go through these steps, and sometimes you might just want to run the model a few times to refine it. Now, the other thing that you need to be aware of is the subprompting. So you might say, let's say I have a piece of legislation that comes out, right? And then I might have a boss that says, what effect would that legislation have on the company strategy? Right? So what I would do is I would go and grab this piece of legislation. I would grab this strategy. I would upload those both to my model. I would give it a persona. So I would say, you're a strategist. 2, I want you to assess the legislation file and tell me how it will affect the strategy. Okay, and then what you'd say, I want you to write the insights in point form with examples. So at the end of the day, you've got a structure then of what it's going to come out like. And don't be shy in actually giving this an actual structure. So it might be, what's the change? What's the impact? What's the key observations? Whatever you want. And you can even say to this, express as a table, say for instance. So you could give it the headings that you want to put in there, and you could express it as a table. And so what it's going to do then is it's going to go and read this legislation, it's going to read your strategy, it's going to behave like a strategist, it's going to assess the legislation file, it's going to run through, and it's going to pump it out as a table. And depending on how complicated those two documents are, it may just pump the results out. But what you may want to do is you may want to subprompt that. So if you finished your table and then you said, oh, hang on, I want to add a column of the affected business units, you can also upload the business units with a description. And what it'll do is it will then read that new file, it will then put that into the new column, and then it will feed it back into the model. So don't think if you don't get it right the first time, you can't go back and fix stuff up. You can, and that is a valid way of prompt engineering. So I think that's enough for today. That's a good 20 minutes, but that's a good way of thinking about it. And tomorrow I might give you an example. Cheers.